Hello to you all, dear friends. Thank you so much for stopping in. I hope you're having a fantastic day. This is a video I've been planning to make for a reasonable amount of time. I have had a few requests to talk about the pedals that I've used to do some of the live looping stuff, specifically that I've done on this channel before. But I thought it would also be a good opportunity just to talk a little more generally to do with my pedal board setup, because it's also my recording rig that I'm using to do for the Project Heaven Sent stuff. And I think works really well and sounds kind of unique in the realms of, you know, post-metal or just like progressive metal in general / math rock, as well as a lot of softer, more textural stuff in the realms of like post-rock and ambient and atmospheric sort of minimalist music, all which kind of mashes together to become what is the noises that I make. So just for a bit of frame of reference, I'll provide a link down below to Project Heaven Sent, which is the music I'm currently writing, so you know what this rig sounds like in a recorded setting. As well as that, if you just jump into my channel, you can see some of the late night loops that I've done before, which is also where this rig has come into play. In terms of other gear that is being used right now, I'm using this guitar, which is in effect a complete custom model. How can I explain this to you? It's got two P90s in it. These are specifically bare knuckle supermassive P90s, which is just hot P90 pickups essentially. A maple neck, a rosewood board, and I think this is either mahogany, Carina, or Tasmanian blackwood. I don't know which of it is because I bought this for $80 at a pawn shop and then customized it. So maybe this warrants a video in and of itself, but that's not today's focus. It's running into the Avid 11 rack, and I'm running a patch akin to sort of a matchless 2x12 combo, if that makes any sense at all. Here's what it sounds like without any effects. And hopefully it's in tune. So while I'm tuning, I will mention that the tuning I'm currently using is an open C-ish, so it goes C, G, C, E, B, D from low to high. Okay, cool, so pedal cam is running, so hopefully you'll have a decent view of everything on the board. We'll just step through one at a time with a brief explanation and backstory, and then I'll go through a few quick sounds specific to how I use them. Real quick, one thing that isn't on the board right now because I ran out of space is the Ditto Looper from TC Electronic. I specifically mentioned this because it was used for the late night loops stuff and isn't on the board as we speak, but that's what I used for that. Very dead simple looping pedal, one button to record, and a few other button combinations. It's a really nice handy little jamming looper. It's very fun. So first in the line is just a Boss TU3 chromatic tuner. Nothing really to write home about there other than it does a good job at keeping the guitar in tune. I've had it for a long time and it is working well, so no need to replace it, right? Next in the line is just your classic Ibanez TS9 Overdrive. I'm using it in more or less the traditional modern sense, if that makes any sense at all. The gain very low, the volume very high, and the tone more or less in the middle. Is that on? The LED is not very good on this particular one. It's completely stock, no modifications. And yeah, I'm using it for that sort of pushed clean sort of effect, so. And even that on its own is already kind of crunching up because I've got the effects set as such that it's almost on the point of breakup. So that's a really cool, like, dirty kind of tone. Next in the line is the Cloven Hoof from Earthquaker Devices, which doesn't get a heap of use, I must confess. It's just, I've got it set to go to 11 effectively, and it's just really nasty. Apologies for all the feedback as well. It's going to get really hissy in here right now, but so yeah, it's pretty dang huge sounding. It's got a good wide spectrum of tones available on it. Frankly, I probably don't use it as much as I should, but it is an absolute beast. I would certainly recommend it. Next in the line is the American Overdrive by Tone Rider Analog Effects. I had to read that off the pedal. So this is another one that came from a pawn shop for not very much money. There isn't even much information that I can find about them on the interwebs, other than I think it's made in China. I don't know how many of them are out there, but everyone who has had one, as far as I can tell, really likes them. It's your kind of classic tube screamer kind of vibe, but I don't know, it has something else about it. I'm using it more in a full overdriven kind of sense, so I'm using less volume and more drive, and have it set a little bit darker as well. Specifically because I tend to combine it with the TS9 to get my main full bore overdrive sound. So it's also nice as a sort of a different flavor of pushed clean as well. So here it is on its own. So it gets pretty hairy, but then I really like putting the TS9 in there with it as well. So yeah, I really enjoy that combination, and that's really the core of my sound these days. So yeah, great pedal. I don't know where you might be able to find one, but they are cheap and they sound really good. Next down the line is the Reverb-X by Ranger Effects, out of London if I'm not mistaken. This is a pretty recent addition, and I must say I have fallen in love with it incredibly quickly. I actually found out about it rather, from the Knobs YouTube channel, who does some fantastic stuff. If you somehow haven't heard of them, go and check them out. So it's like a reverb, but also has some strange, in a good way strange, additions that most reverb pedals I've seen don't really have. It does some really out of the box stuff. So it can sound quite lush, and in fact, bear with me one sec. So in this kind of setting, where I'll back up, it's got distortion in the circuit, as well as a noise gate, which you can change to be either before or after the reverb, which is really cool. I'll show you in a sec. So. So that's a more traditional kind of reverby sort of sound that you can get out of it. Then I can crank the distortion, and it's also got an input knob as well, so you can push into that distortion harder if you really want it to clip. And I'll try get it to clip, because there's a little clipping LED in there as well. So you see a bit of a flicker there. I can push it a little harder. And you're getting into really nasty territory. I'll boost the size a bit as well. And that's its bright reverb mode, I suppose. Then it's got a switch down here, and it can go into dark reverb mode. Things just start to get a little hairier in a very nice way. So yeah, it's got a reverb, sorry, the reverb has a gate in front of it by default, but you can move that to go after the reverb as well. And what that results in is like moments of epicness that are cut short very quickly. So I'll turn it on, and I've used this quite a bit in my recordings already, so. So you get the full effect of that reverb for that instant moment that you're playing, and then it cuts off really hard. And it gives the effect of something that you would have edited a lot in post-production to get a really strange effect that I don't think you can find many other places. So that's why I have it. And what I've done as well quite oftentimes is run my pedals later in the chain on after it. specifically the reverbs. For example, I haven't talked about this pedal yet, but it's another reverb, so if I go... So the Reverb-X cuts off, but then the reverbs after it pull the remaining tail that's available after the gate clamps on, and you just get a really beautiful yet strange effect. Anyway, while I've got the next pedal on, this is the Wash version 2 by Hungry Robot Pedals, another absolute fantastic one that I actually want to do a proper review of. They call it the Wash because it gives sort of an ambient undertow quality of reverb underneath what it is you're normally playing. It doesn't go to 100% wet, and it gives, like I said, sort of that tickling under the surface kind of reverbs. I'll just play. So there's actually a delay in this circuit as well as what they call the wash reverb circuit. I don't know the full technical specs off the top of my head, but in essence, the wash circuit causes a bit of self-oscillation whereby the delay gets pumped back through the reverb circuit itself and causes that sort of warbling undertow of reverb that you get. I'll crank it up a little bit so you get a bit of a better feel. So yeah, very cool. It also comes in a tap tempo version. I've got the manual version because it's mostly for me a set and forget. When I'm doing ambient stuff, just having that constantly going, just at an arbitrary delay, to be quite honest, creates some really interesting texture. So I'm a big fan. Next down the line is the ARP87 from Walrus Audio. Quite a well-known brand, I must say. Very impressive pedal and ticked a lot of boxes for me when that came out. Because it's a small box with lots of different options, and it has a tap tempo, which makes recording, for me, quite joyous because I can get things relatively in sync. I've done a full review on this pedal as well, actually, if you jump to the channel, which goes through all the modes and what they do. But this is essentially my straight up delay, so... Not even sure what I've got it set on right now, but it sounds pretty good. And it's also got subdivisions, which I really should have mentioned. It's that combination of subdivision and tap tempo that makes this pedal very, very nice to use. For example, let's go up to dotted eighths. So it's an incredibly flexible pedal, and again, really all of these reverbs and delays form the ambient stuff that I do. There's, I guess, technically 3 reverbs and 3 delays on this board, so it might seem pretty excessive, but they all serve very particular purposes. So if we put the wash on in front of that delay, we start to get into some really spacious territory. And then if I'm feeling really crazy, and frankly this happens more often than it should, more reverb. Which brings us to the next pedal in the chain, and that is the Mr. Black Supermoon. More conventional, I suppose, in its reverbiness compared to its previous 2 friends on the board. Here it is. It can go quite large in its tail. I'll crank it up a little bit. I find it quite enjoyable insofar that it's quite a musical reverb, if that can make any sense at all. It doesn't have that weird shimmeriness that some reverbs can have, where you play a thing and then the reverb's like really chimey and sort of alien compared to the source signal. So it's really nice, and it because it's sort of, and I don't mean this negatively, but because it's more sort of plain, I suppose, or just more straightforward in what it offers, it sets a really good platform to do some of the more weird stuff that I try to do on occasion. It does get a little wacky if you crank the sway in, which is kind of like a really slow chorus effect, I guess, for lack of a better term, so. I'm just muting on purpose so you can hear the tail. So it's got that sort of warble, that not even quite a semitone, like microtonal, out of tune sort of noise, which is really fun, and like big, catastrophic sort of sounds that can do a really cool thing. So there's that. So next down the chain is the Sub Up by TC Electronic, and it does what it says on the tin. It is 1 octave up, 1 octave down, or 2 octaves down, and you can blend that in any way you want. This was on the wish list for quite some time when it came to doing the ambient stuff, because it just adds this sort of alien texture, I suppose. A lot of the ambient and atmospheric stuff I listen to has multiple octaves going on, and I was always really gravitated to that sort of sound, so I wanted to get one for myself, and this sort of does the job in that it octaves up and down without coloring the effects at all, really. It just does exactly what it needs to do, and then it leaves me to my own devices in terms of adding on top of the blank canvas that it offers. So quite often for the ambient stuff I'm using an octave up, keeping the main signal, the original signal, blended all the way in, and then sort of adding the octave up to taste. So on its own, but add some lushness in. And things get really interesting. And bear with me while I tweak it, because you can also get really fun with this on the dirty side of things. So if I take out the octave up and take out some of the dry signal and then put some of the octave down in, and then you get a little filthy with it. You can see how that can get really fun and addictive. I haven't really used that too much in any actual musical capacity, but yeah, it can get pretty interesting. Actually, somewhere in the middle of all that, I can't remember, I think after the wash, the Line 6 DL4 comes into play. I've had this thing for years and it's a little bit broken, if I must confess. It's basically a big all-in-one delay, as well as a funky freaking looper, which is mainly what I use it for. I don't use it so much for its delay capacity, but I mean, it sounds good. I mean, it's got like funky reverse delays in there, which is a preset I've got. But the looper is definitely the main weapon of choice. Specifically because it's got some cool options once you've recorded the loop, specifically reverse, double time, and half time functionality. So if I just get a really basic loop in there, so that's kind of boring and vanilla on its own, right? But then, so that's octaved it down. No wait, and slowed it down too. So now it's running at half tempo, and it pitch shifts it down as a result, and it's also reversed. So you're getting some funky stuff. Then, of course, you add these kinds of sounds, and things can start to get really interesting. Let's put some octave in as well. And then if I put some sway from the supermoon, and these kinds of noises are what very much forms the basis for a lot of the ambient undertow that appears in the music that I do. So yeah, a very cool pedal. I mean, frankly, for my purposes, its size betrays its functionality. There might be a better pedal out there in a smaller box that'll do what I want and give me some real estate back on the board. But for now, it's doing the job, and it holds some sentimental value because it's one of the first pedals that I purchased. So yeah, actually I need these puppies on for the last thing, because the last one in the chain is the Freeze by El Nano. So if you're familiar at all with how a piano works and its sustainer, that's essentially what this is. Again, very nice and handy when it comes to doing cool ambient stuff. So I'll mostly use it in the context of volume swells, but of course you can just hold it like this and then, you know, do. So yeah, that's got a few different modes, including a latch mode, which means you can just press it once and it will hold that note or chord until you tell it to otherwise. And I've had that again for a very long time. And it's cool. I really, really like it. It can create, especially in combination with the Line 6's looper, you can do some really strange alien sounding stuff. And again, I've used it loads in recordings and those sorts of things. Last in the chain, which isn't particularly relevant, is the MXR AB box. I've got that in place because I sometimes mess with stereo rigs and imagine a time when I'm going to be playing on stage and have 2 amps going at the same time. I've used it a little bit for live looping stuff as well. When you've got 2 rigs, which I do have that option, you can send different effects to different amps and just create all sorts of cool and weird stuff. So I've just got it on the board right now because I don't want to take it off the board. As you can see, I've only got the A channel on right now, which is being sent over to the effects rack. But yeah, it's really cool. And if you have 2 amps or 2 different things you can plug into, I definitely recommend playing around with one because it's very cool. So I hope that was moderately interesting. As always, if you have any questions or queries about any of the stuff on the board, oh, I should mention it's being powered by a Fuel Tank Junior and a Walrus Audio ATOS, so there's 2 different power supplies in there. For anyone wondering, because of this big beast of a pedal, the Line 6 that is, the ATOS is specifically powering the Line 6 DL4 because it has the output required. So, pro tip, if you're in the market for something like that, the Fuel Tank Junior is just doing a lot of the basic 9-volt stuff. So, both very good, very clean power supplies, so thumbs up for them. But yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts or recommendations, if there's something I could be doing better, please leave them down below. If you want to know more about this guitar or in fact any others behind me, give me a shout and I can talk about those because I like talking about gear. So why not, right? Otherwise, be sure to leave a thumbs up. Subscribe if you enjoyed this content, because I do want to make more of it, that is for sure. And I hope to see you again next time. Catch you later.